Stop trying to be perfect. It's a dead-end road. The Imperfect Feminist is an uncensored, unedited look at feminism and practical ways to be a strong, brave woman in your life, career, and business. Dr. Dodd is a pharmacist, entrepreneur, coach, and leader, and she has been a pharmacist for 22 years. She is the founder and CEO of Your Pharmacy Advocate, and she is on a mission to provide pharmacist advocate care for patients seeking better health results. Hi, Jerrica. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Jessica. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited you're here. Jerrica and I met a couple of years ago virtually, and then you came and spoke at the Superwoman Summit last year, and you were one of our keynote speakers. So it's so great to see you live and in person again.
Yes, thank you for having me live
Yeah.
and in person again.
Absolutely. So, since this show is all about feminism and practical advice for women, I like to start out asking all of my guests about their feminist beliefs. So, can you start out by giving me your definition of feminism? What's your brand of feminism?
My brand of feminism is being authentically who I was purposed and called to be, being brave, being confident, and being sure of what I was called to be. And obviously that's a progression. And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't, start my adult life with that level of confidence and surety. However, for me, it's a confidence in knowing that I have a voice, I have a purpose, and there is a plan for my life and a plan for how I am to leave this earth. So that is what feminism means to me.
I love it. I love it. So, right now, Jerrica, we are having this conversation under the backdrop of two big things. One is the global pandemic, which we'll get to, and millions of people protesting around the world for Black Lives Matter. And as a woman who I know is passionate about equity, diversity, and inclusion, what do you think is the number one thing feminists can do to support the Black Lives Matter movement right now?
I think one of the biggest things that can be done is to acknowledge. I think acknowledgement goes a long way. If you have friends that are Black, and this may seem really trite and simple, but really, I think it goes a long way to just have conversations with them and acknowledge and ask. I realized when everything erupted, a little over a month ago, I realized how many of my white friends that this topic had never come up in conversation. Maybe because for me, I always shrugged my shoulders and said, well, that's just the way things are. Maybe for them, because they maybe said that's just the way things are. But I think one of the biggest things that can be done is acknowledgement. Then I feel that education is definitely paramount. I feel that whether you are a woman of color or whether you are a white woman, education is key for all of us, because I know I have gone back and doubled down and been doing learning history more than what I already knew. I've been reading, and because I've been asked by many people, what should I read? What should I do? How do I respond? And so I think acknowledgement, education, but then ultimately, Jessica, I'll tell you, and this was the topic of a post that I did on social media. Women did not give themselves the right to vote, their oppressors did. Black people did not emancipate themselves from slavery, their oppressors did. Racism will not be solved until those who are continuing to keep the system of racism alive turn from that way and say, we're not going to do this anymore. And so hence my point is that Black people will not solve the racism problem. And I would venture to say that yes, people of color are the recipient of the detriment of the system of racism, but it's not our problem to solve.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I would agree 100%. And in my work, it's been a lot to empower women who I feel are disenfranchised and oppressed. And there's a lot of conversation around allyship and partnering with men to change the
Yes.
system. And so I think in a similar way, it's about people of color partnering with
Mhm.
white people to change the system. I'm curious, and we didn't talk about this in advance, but what are some of the ways that you think, like practical ways that you think we can contribute to making this country better for Black people or people of color?
So one of the things that, as I was saying, I think educating yourself to even understand what the problem is. And I think that comes from talking with people and reading and listening and watching and asking questions. But even beyond that, I read the story of a woman who, and it might have been on LinkedIn, a woman who saw a young Black man being stopped by the police, and she was going the same direction on a street. She turned around, came back, and stopped at at the scene of this traffic stop and said, "Is everything okay?" And she said because she could not obviously imagine, but she could imagine what Black mothers must experience or Black fathers must experience, worried about their sons, or Black women experience worrying about men, or women in general. I mean, because it doesn't necessarily have to be Black, but worrying about people who don't make it through simple traffic stops because they go awry. And so I remember thinking, wow, now that's practical, to just stop and ask, because if there is a witness, it's probably not likely to go awry, if you would. And I think another way, and so that's just something, the story that I read of someone who basically used their privilege to assist someone who did not have privilege and be able to run the risk of what all that entailed. I think from an economic perspective, I feel that looking at where money is spent, where you spend your money, everybody, not just white people, not just Black people, where you spend your money. And if the places where you spend your money are only putting up a trite statement of Black Lives Matter, but their actions and their upper management and their board of directors does not reflect the statement that they've made, then consider not spending your money there, because I think economically that will be a big way that people are able to contribute.
Absolutely. And that is one of the things, right? Money changes minds, right?
Yeah. Yes, yes.
And I really appreciate those practical ideas, because I think for me, that's what I tend to focus on. And I know one of the things that I've been passionate about in my work for a really long time is amplifying the voices of Black women and making sure that I'm giving them, really advocating for them to be on stage with me or to be in the room, and bringing women on my podcast, that sort of
Yeah.
thing. And because I have privilege that I want to share and to open doors for these women. And so I'm always looking for other practical ways to do it. So thank you.
If I can add to that,
Yes,
I had a
please.
conversation with a friend last week, and we were reminiscing on a time when we used to work together. And for part of that time, she was my manager, but the other part of the time, she was a teammate and a mentor. And we talked about how I experienced some racist events while working for this particular company. And unfortunately, she was the only one who would stand up to people that had power like HR or management and say, "What are you doing? This is wrong." And as we talked, one of the things, and that's why I think conversation is so helpful, because I knew, and I definitely remember how she stood up for me, but she went on to talk about how she stood up for many people when they experienced injustice in the workplace. And she talked about how she knew that her own personal career had definitely taken a hit, but she felt like she couldn't stay silent watching things happen that she knew were blatantly wrong. And so that's what I mean when I say, when a person uses their privilege to help someone who doesn't have that privilege and assumes the risk of whatever that means, if it means that your career doesn't go as far, but being willing to stand up for what's right.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen, sister. So, I feel like we could spend a ton of time on this, but this isn't like really your area of expertise. So I want to make sure we talk about that, the area of expertise that you're in. But before we do, there's this global pandemic going on, and where because of the pandemic, many people are under stay-at-home orders around the country, and unemployment is at an all-time high.
Mhm.
I know that you're passionate about helping women be brave under difficult circumstances. So, what is your advice for our listeners who really could use a pep talk right now during this incredibly uncertain time?
Well, and one of the things that I've seen on social media, and I do believe it to be true, is we know of several businesses that we can, find and point to that have emerged from times like what we're in now.
Mhm.
So, in that regard, it gives me hope. Obviously, I cringe anytime I hear any news of rising cases and all of the statistics that are surrounding these, and definitely what that means for us and our health, and minorities even in their health. However, I do believe that it's a time of opportunity, and if someone is affected on their job or in their business, I think this is really the opportunity to, though you don't feel like it, it's the opportunity to try something new. It's an opportunity to shift. The way we did business prior to the initial shutdown is not likely going to be the way that we're going to do business continuously, as it looks like the coronavirus is going to be something that we contend with for a little while. So I think it's important to understand that in these times, it's so important to look for what's possible. And I think that if we take a step back, look at what's possible, look at, we say what necessity is the mother of invention, what's necessary, and how can you provide what's necessary? What problems can you solve for other people right now? There's possibility out there.
Yeah, you're right. So much opportunity as we pivot and shift. And I know you work with women privately as a coach. And what are you seeing? And you work with a lot of pharmacists because of your background as a doctor and a pharmacist. So, what are some pivots that you're seeing some of your clients make?
Looking at how to provide services online, how to price those services, where I can tell you that personally, when I was offering services end of 2019, beginning of 2020, those services were for longer periods of time, longer contracts, higher price points, and looking at how do I provide that same level of service or even more for a shorter length of time, because people are not as likely, I have seen, to want to commit to longer term contracts because of the uncertainty of the times, but still willing to commit to shorter term contracts, willing to commit to a dollar point that they go, okay, I can see that in the coming months, versus 6-12 months from now committing to something long term. Providing services that, because we've all gone virtual, everybody is on Zoom or Skype or whatever the platform is, but figuring out how to perform your services on a virtual platform. What do people need now that they're at home? They, for example, they still need exercise, they still need opportunities for movement. So we've definitely seen, with gyms closing, that entire business, if you will, has gone online, and there's plenty of offerings to suit every personality online. And one of my clients, that's why it came to mind, one of my clients is a personal trainer, pharmacist and personal trainer. And that's something that she has increased her online presence in serving her clients.
That's awesome. So, I think one of the things I want to back up and really dive into is your story. And in particular, I know that you've been through some challenging times in your life. I've heard you tell your story on stage, and you've been really brave during some hard times. What do you rely on to get you through? And, as you look back on your life, what has really been your foundation, your biggest support during a difficult time?
My foundation, whether times are difficult or whether they're smooth sailing, has been and continues to be my faith in God.
Mhm.
I will tell you that I've had brain surgery 4 years ago, but you know that, but the audience may not. And oftentimes when I look at things that come up, it doesn't mean that I don't feel fear, but I definitely have a vantage point of how I felt after the 19th of April in 2016. And I go, oh, this is nothing compared to that. And so I think just having that experience, you've heard me also talk about having a difficult marriage, and having experiences like those. Even now, more recently, I've been asked to speak about the racism that I experienced in corporate America. When I look back at those experiences, one, I learned a lot. Two, I think that those experiences strengthened me, and they let me know that I didn't come as far as those experiences only to come that far. I've obviously passed through that test or that trial or those circumstances, and here I am. And so I'm very grateful that for every experience I've had, whether in the moment I thought it was happy or it felt good or not, I think that that has shaped me to be who I am. And when I look at my coaching clients, I see a little piece of myself in each one of their stories.
Yeah, I know. That is one of the great things about being a coach is being able to just really relate to them. So I want to talk about I would like you to tell the story to our listeners about when you found out you needed to have brain surgery and your your journey with that, because I think it's a really universal story that a lot of women can relate to.
So when I found out I had to have brain surgery, I have to set the stage in that I had experienced 13 years of different symptoms and signs that there was a problem with my health. And even I think probably one of the craziest things about it is that I am a healthcare professional, but I don't feel like you can be your own doctor, if you would. I don't feel like I should practice anything on myself. So if you can imagine, me being a patient, I think healthcare practitioners don't make the greatest patients. I had this constellation of symptoms, from this amazing grueling pressure in my head that I felt like if I just had a little lever on top, I could just relieve that pressure every day. And it, for some reason, only felt better when I was on an airplane. But then when I'd land, I'd feel the pressure again. Yes. And so I was always happy to travel because at least that gave me some temporary relief for some reason. And I tell people it was like I was playing a whack-a-mole game. It was like I had a mallet, the whack-a-mole game at the fair where the little moles pop up out of the hole and you have to anticipate what's coming next. And so I felt like I had that mallet hitting down every symptom, from, like I said, the pressure in my head to not being able to walk on one of my legs to urinary incontinence. Yes, yes. I mean, I paused there because I wasn't even 40 years old yet, and I had some of my most embarrassing moments because once my brain got the signal that I had to go to the restroom, there was no time to walk there. It was just too late. And so all of this was happening, and I was so caught up in taking care of everyone else. My parents had been ill. My father had been diagnosed with cancer. My mother had stage four. My father had stage four lymphoma. My mother had had triple bypass heart surgery, emerged from that surgery with a dementia that lasted for a very long time, a couple of years. And then 5 months after her surgery, I'm finally, landing on the doorstep of the neurosurgeon, not really realizing how exhausted I was. And he says, very matter of factly, you need brain surgery. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Because what ran through my head, though I didn't say it, was, you don't understand. My dad had just, 10 months earlier been diagnosed with cancer. My mother had had this heart surgery, and she was in a dementia and could not advocate or even really do much for herself. And I thought, I can't leave my sister to take care of my mom by herself and me go, have brain surgery. And then I thought about, I just accepted a new job. I hadn't put any deposits in the bank at that job. So how was I going to go and make a withdrawal and say, oh, by the way, I need to be gone for 8 weeks while I heal? And then I was on the leadership team and at my church ministry. And I knew that if I had this short-term disability, if you will, that meant that there would be less money that I would be putting in the offering and the collection plate. And I managed the finances for the church. So I knew just all of this responsibility of taking care of everyone else. And what I did not realize when that neurosurgeon, and he just looked at me like he was so patient. And I even came home and didn't like his person. I told my friend, I said, I didn't like his personality. And she was like, look, we just need him to be the best neurosurgeon. He is not trying to be your best friend. We don't care about that. So literally, just anything that was going to protect the identity that I had built for myself of taking care of everyone else. I was always all right because I had to be, whether I was or not. And obviously I was not with this whole whack-a-mole game of symptoms. I had to be all right because I was helping with every other situation and person in my life. And I remember saying to the neurosurgeon, so what happens if I don't do it? I had a bit of an attitude, unfortunately. And he just matter-of-factly stood there and said, you'll be paralyzed. And he continued to wait. And I wonder what he thought, because I can tell you all that I just said was running through my head. And then I said, well, how long until, how much time do I have? Which translates to, how long do I have until I'm paralyzed? And he said, Miss Dodd, I can't answer that. I don't have a crystal ball. You've made it thus far, but you need to have this surgery. So I was trying to bargain, this was March when we're having the conversation. I was trying to bargain, can we put it off till August? Because my company had a week shutdown. And I was like, can we do it? And he he must have been so exasperated with me because I was basically contending with myself. Ultimately, I had the surgery the very next month. So I came to my senses, but the lesson there is I had a history of not prioritizing myself, in that my dad said to me at 8 years old, how prophetic, it's not your job to make everybody happy.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I love that story. You're such a good storyteller. Well, I think a lot of women can relate to that story. Maybe it's not that they need to have brain surgery, but
Right.
wow, just in my own journey, the pandemic has shifted some of my thinking around my business and things that I want to do. And my initial thought is, what is everybody going to think? And how am I going to how am I going to take care of other people first? And I think so many women struggle with that. And I really love how you said your faith is one of the things that got you through. Because I'm finding right now during this really uncertain time, it's one of the only things that's getting me through.
Yes.
And I'm not a religious person. I don't go to church, but I do believe in something bigger than me. And it's like the only thing that gets me through the day right now.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I have said to people that I think of the world and, maybe the hamster wheel that our world was on, that I feel like God has stopped the merry-go-round of the world to let us get off and rest for a little while. Because when I think about the pace, even when I saw you last, when I think about the pace that I was moving, I saw you in last October. And if I could show you my travel schedule from last October, you would be like, how did you do that? Just the pace that I was going. And granted, I think the difference now that I'm a full-time entrepreneur was I was going at that pace, but I was loving every moment of it. So I was loving being in Portland, and I went to Guatemala, and I was, just having a great time and traveling and building my business and working definitely, but connecting with a lot of people that mean a lot to me. But I still was going pretty fast, on that little wheel. And so now that this merry-go-round has slowed down, allowed us to sit and take inventory and breathe and think about what's really important. This marks week 20 that I've been home and haven't been traveling. And I will tell you, I think that I've spent more time home than I did in the previous 16 years in all of my travels, just in this 20 weeks, all these consecutive nights. But it's been a sort of healing, if you would.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I so agree. And I think we can, during this time where there is a lot of uncertainty and we don't know what's going to happen, and maybe there's a lot of fear and doubt, if you peel back the layers of what are you leaning on to get you through and what are you
Right.
trusting, it
Mm-hmm.
really comes down to having some sort of faith or optimism or
Yes.
hope in that it will be okay and that this is all happening for a reason, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I feel like, each day I wake up, that's a gift. And, my health is definitely, has definitely been, since I left corporate America in 2018, but my health continues to be my focus. And I'm grateful for the space of having the time to work out and not, feel like, oh, I don't have time because I'm going on that wheel, if you will. And I mean, just to be able to take in the beauty around me. Like, it rained today, and I'm like, oh, the flowers and the grass got the watering that they needed. And just the simple things. I went out probably about 3 weeks ago and just looked at all the blooms in my yard. And like, those for me are like the wonderful gifts, in my opinion, that God has given us. And so I literally walked around my front yard taking pictures of the butterfly bush and the hydrangeas and the rose bushes, and really just enjoying that. And I don't know that just from, prior to all of this, I think I definitely would have seen them in passing, coming, in and out of the house. However, to actually stop and go out and photograph them and be like, wow, what a sweet gift right here surrounding my house, that I don't know that I took the time to do that before.
Yeah, it is healing. I think you're right. So one of the things I want to make sure we talk about today is that clearly one of your biggest passions is helping women value themselves, put their health first, really value like prioritizing themselves, setting boundaries, that sort of thing. So in your own journey, it sounds like you struggled with this fear of letting other people down. And what do you tell a woman who is maybe like considering a change in her life or is considering putting herself first for the first time, and she's scared of letting other people down by setting a boundary? What do you tell her?
Well, one of the things that I do with my coaching clients is we go through an exercise of what if. Because oftentimes I feel that humans in general, but we're talking about women, I feel that women have fears that we don't even usually express them. We just kind of go, oh no, I don't do that. No, that's not for me. No, I don't care for that. But we don't say, you know what, I don't care for that because I'm really afraid because I don't know how to do it. Or I don't care for that, or that's not for me because I'm afraid of what people will say if I do it. So we had a session with my coaching class, my group, where I just asked, like, what is it that you're afraid of doing? Like, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? And okay, well, if that's what you would do, then why aren't we doing it? And then you start to peel back those layers and you get to what the real fear is. And I have, in our conversations, I've uncovered things like the tape of what my mother's expectations, one of my clients, what her mother's expectations would have been for how her house is to look. And I said, well, that's a tape that's running. I said, because first of all, has your mother ever said anything? She goes, no, she's actually very helpful. She comes and she helps me with things that need to be done around the house. And two, I said, your mother wasn't building a business. When you're thinking back to your childhood, your mother had the time to be at home. And so that's the example you had, but your life looks different from hers. So I don't know that it's fair to yourself to have this tape running in your head of, my mother would say these clothes need to be folded, or it's a different time and you're doing different things and you don't have the time that she had. Another, had the concern of people having an opinion that she didn't know what she was talking about, or that she was, look stupid, were her words. And when I kept drilling down to say, okay, let's uncover a little bit more. Who are these people? And the answer was, well, I don't know. I mean, just people. And, we also, oftentimes you'll hear people say, well, you know what they say.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always like, well, who is they?
Mm-hmm.
And really, it's very difficult. Like, people can't answer, well, who they is or who people are. And so then I say, well, have these people ever sent you any money? Like, you're building a business. Are they helping you build your business? Are they sending you any money to help you with building? Have they sent you any checks signed they or people? And they laugh and they go, no, like, because I think that they're able to see, like, this is a fear, definitely, but it's not founded. And so I have a statement that I say to them: there are no monsters under the bed.
Mm-hmm.
Because when we're little, that's what the big fear is. There's monsters under there. And I said, so I want you to just imagine that we're pulling up those bed sheets or that bed skirt and looking under the bed, and there are no monsters under there. Whatever it is that you want to do, let's go do it. Let's develop a contingency plan if we need to. Like, if you go on, you're doing a video live and you mess up, let's, just abort the process, or, what have you. Let's figure out a contingency plan instead of staying stuck because of a fear that's not founded on even an actual real person causing that kind of fear.
Yeah, it's great advice. So when you're working with your clients, I know part of getting people to prioritize themselves is helping them set boundaries. So do you have any practical advice for helping women get better with their boundary setting?
Yes, I tell women, whether they're single or married, whether they have children or not, that you may have to work into this, but the first hour of your day and the last hour of your day belong to you. And for those that have children that are school age, that have bedtimes, I was like, you need to enforce your bedtimes, because, I think there was a little laxness, if you will, because of the pandemic and, homeschooling and what have you. And I was like, I think if you still offer that structure, then your kids will appreciate it, and it will also give you time to yourself. And I said, if you're waking up at the same time the rest of your family's waking up, you're already behind. And for the single woman, because I definitely had this challenge myself, I have to wake up and make sure that the phone is still on do not disturb for some time in the morning, so that I can have that first hour for me. If not, the phone will start ringing, and then you just roll into the day and you're like, what happened? How did that happen? So that's one of I think it's one of the best places to start with boundaries. The first hour and the last hour of your day, whether everybody's up or whether they're gone to bed, you say, I'm going to retire to my room and for this last hour before you go to sleep. And I think it gives you a chance to wind down, because to run into your bedroom, jump in the bed, and your brain is still going because you've had all the screens on, and then we expect that we're going to have a restful night's sleep, which definitely is going to dictate what the next morning is going to be like. It won't work. And so that's one of the first places that I have them start, is take that first hour and that last hour, whether it's for exercise, reading, journaling, affirmations, visualizations, whatever it is, take an hour for yourself. There's 24 hours in a day. So that leaves 22 left if you take 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the evening.
I love it. It reminds me of I'm in the middle of Michelle Obama's book, Becoming. Did you read it? Have you read it
Yes.
yet? Oh my
Yes.
gosh. So she talks about how Barack Obama is like, before he was president, he's going to the state legislature and they have two little kids, and how she wasn't able to work out and she had all this resentment. And then they went to couples counseling, and she realized that she just needed to be better at taking care of herself and setting her own boundaries. And when she did, like, she had in the morning, just like you said, she was like working out in the morning, and in the evening had like a schedule she kept the kids to, so that they were in bed by a certain time and that she could have her time to herself. So I think it's great advice. So okay, so we've touched on this a lot. Like, a lot of women just care too damn much about what other people think, and this really holds them back from doing what's best. So okay, so let's say you do the sweep under the bed. You look for the monsters, right? And it's like, I find a monster and it actually exists. Like, my mother or my father or my husband is not going to like this. How do we let go of that? How do we know, like, we're going to make a decision that they're not going to approve of? What are we going to do?
So it's interesting. I just recorded video for my coaching group earlier today, and I talked about surrounding yourself with people that are going to support you on this journey. And I said, we're like the 5 people we spend the most time with, whether it's in person or talking to. And I gave the caveat, because that would be a whole different conversation in video. But I was like, if your spouse, who generally, if you're married, that's the person that you're interacting with the most, if that person is not supportive of your journey or whatever it is that you're trying to do, I'm not advocating that you get rid of the spouse. Like I said, that's a different conversation. However, I would say that until you're ready to deal with that, because that in itself is a another conversation, the other 4 people in your life need to be very, very strong and supportive, because you need people that are going to support you, that are going to encourage you, that are going to let you vent, but then after you vent, they go, okay, let's get back up, let's get going. You need that, and you need people that are going to believe in you. And I used to think that those would be people that would just naturally appear because they would already be in your life, but I learned that that's not true. And so sometimes your closest family, your closest friends are not meant to be in the front row, if you would, supporting you on whatever journey you're going on. And not because necessarily there's anything inherently wrong with them. Sometimes they don't understand the journey that you're going on. Sometimes they see you developing personally and they're not ready to develop, and so that can be threatening to them. Also, sometimes they see you and they feel that it shines a light on their shortcomings or what they wish that they had done or could do. And so there are all kinds of reasons, in my opinion, that you're going to have detractors or haters. However, I think that it's very important to surround yourself with a group of people, whether they be related to you, whether they be, your best friend or not. Definitely. I don't have an opinion there, but if they're not, go find those people.
Yeah. Oh, yes, I agree. I mean, and I love that quote, you are the average of the 5 people you hang out with most. And it sounds awful sometimes, but I say, like, you need to up your average sometimes.
Yes, I
Right?
agree.
Like, you need to be around people who really support your higher best self. So I love that. All right.
I've
Well,
been told, if
go
I can
ahead.
add
Yeah.
one thing, I've been told that you should look at their lives, and their lives are what your life is. It's just simple, because you're the average, if you will. And so if you're looking at their life and you disagree or you don't want your life to go that direction, I feel like you will have to spend a lot of energy trying for it not to go in that direction if you keep that person in your close 5.
Right. And sometimes I think you made this point. It's their stuff, it's their fear, and you're triggering that in them, and it has nothing to do with you. Right. And so I remember telling my mom that once. I was like, that's your fear. You keep that fear to yourself. And I love you. But when you feel that fear creep in, I'm not going to take it away from you. Like, you have to
Right.
sit with it. You have to deal with it. That's not my responsibility. And she did and that really improved our relationship, setting that boundary.
And I think that happens a lot with parents. I did a coaching call last month, and I was asking, these are people who are not my clients, what's holding you back? And someone wrote in the chat of the webinar and said, I don't want to let my parents down. And I said, well, I know everyone on this call is definitely over 30, probably heading towards 40. And so we are like seriously adults now, but those relationships sometimes can have a place to where you're really afraid to do anything because of what your parents might think. And we're talking people who have families of their own, but they're still not wanting to let their parents down.
Yeah, I know. I went through that early on. And I know that, you and I have talked about that, like in like your own personal life. And I think we all struggle with it. So it is something we all have to work with, and it's a practice. And
Yes.
I think all of this, right? This boundary setting, valuing ourselves, prioritizing our health, it's all a practice. And the more you strengthen that muscle, the better you get at
Yes,
it.
I agree.
Well, this has been a great interview, and I am so appreciative of your time. And how can people get a hold of you if they want to connect, they want to follow you, they want to, really get more of Dr. Jerrica Dodd?
Well, my website is drjerricadodd.com. So it's DR for Dr. Jerrica, Jerrica, Dodd, Dodd, drjerricadodd.com. Or I hang out quite a bit on LinkedIn, and it's fine to send me a message or a connection request. And then I'm also on Facebook and Instagram.
Awesome. Well, we will put the links to all of that in the show notes.
Okay.
And thank you again for your time, and hang out with me. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this show, then we invite you to subscribe and leave a review. Your review matters so much, and we would be so, so grateful for your time if you just took a second and went on over to your podcast app and left a review. Your review helps us get in front of other people who might not otherwise know about us. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stop trying to be perfect. It's a dead-end road.